Hi, welcome to this show. What co-living can teach us about quarantine life. I am very excited to do this one, and I have one of my housemates here. So I will introduce everybody in a momentito. But I thought we would begin by checking in, which is one of the things that we often do at meetings or at gatherings in an intentional community. And today I invite us to check in with 3 words. Can be feeling words, can be sensations, but 3. And I always, whenever we do something like this in a group, immediately when somebody presents it, my mind's like, okay, what am I going to say? What am I going to say? And then by the time it gets around to me, it's usually not true anymore, or it's different, or it's, a little bit altered. And so I really have been trying to, okay, so my brain wants to prepare because it wants to be ready and it wants to be right and it wants to do the thing well. Brain do that. And then when it comes around to me, I just take a moment and close my eyes and take a breath and try to feel what's actually there then. So I'm going to do that. I feel excited. I feel nervous. I feel a wee bit sad. And with that, I'm in. And we can snaps if you like. And then, Gui, would you go next?
Sure, I'd love to. I don't know. Actually, I've been trying to think about the one word unknown is what comes closest to it. But there's like this notion of unknown than feeling. It's not a feeling, but I guess it's like facing the unknown, whatever that provokes. And the other one is grounded. And the third one is playful. I'm gonna bring some playfulness in here today.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Gia?
I'm feeling soft, warm, and happy.
How nice to have some soft, warm, and happy in this space.
That was like a cheesecake.
And Denise?
It's more of a verb, maybe. Common. Sad and frustrated.
Thank you.
Thanks for sharing.
If anybody else who's in the room wants to share your 3 words, put them in the comments as I am introducing, because it's introduction time. And for the first several shows, I forgot to introduce myself, so I'm going to make sure that I do that in case people don't know or they're watching later and they are curious. My name is Lila, and I'm a lifelong student of human connection. I've been called an intimacy investigator, and I like that. That feels right to me. That rings true to me. I'm the host of the Horizontal with Lila podcast, which is recorded while lying down next to one another in bed wearing robes. It is my favorite thing. I love it so much. And as far as this show goes, I'm a founding member of Hacienda Villa, which is a sex-positive intentional community based in Bushwick, Brooklyn. The principles of the community, and we'll talk a little bit more about principles later, but the principles of our community, Denise and I are housemates, are sex positivity, community, inclusivity, kindness, compassionate communication, integrity, stewardship, responsible hedonism, self-actualization, and social responsibility. I've been living at the villa with 13 others, so 14-member intentional community for 6 years. We're also part of a small consortium of 3 other intentional communities that we abbreviate to VICE, Villa, Utopia, Chandelier, and Ellery, VYCE, Vice. And we get together, we had been getting together for about a year, once a month, and we would rotate the potluck, and we would talk about issues that we were having and ways to resolve things and joys and things that were working. And I've also visited intentional communities outside of Portland, Oregon, one in rural Georgia, which was fascinating, called the Hostel in the Forest, a couple in San Francisco, and I attended the Intentional Community Conference at Twin Oaks, which is the longest running intentional community that I think exists in the United States, and that's in Virginia. I want to now introduce Gia Lynn. Gia Lynn is an author. She's written a book called On Blossoming, which is a sex ed book for young people. It's a pleasure positive endeavor, right? So the sex ed that we wish we had, the sex ed that we never got, where we were taught about pleasure and consent and communication and decision making, all of this is present in her book. She is the daughter of sex educators, yes? 2 of them? Right?
Yep.
And she has lived her entire life in an intentional community. I don't know anybody else like that.
Wow.
And she still chooses to live in one. Pretty neat, pretty interesting. And then I will introduce my housemates, Denise. Denise is a sound engineer, a lovely human being, also a student of Human Connection. We've made some beautiful episodes of the podcast together. We've gone through some fractious times together, and we have been able to lovingly communicate our way out of it in such a way that our connection is, I think, one of the strongest in our home. And I feel so grateful for it. I'm grateful for you in my life.
Thank you.
And then let me introduce my co-host for this show, Gui has been studying intentional communities, has been interviewing and researching, has visited over 100 intentional communities across the world in preparation for writing a book on co-living spaces. Is it called the Co-Living Diaries, or is that the name of the newsletter?
No, that's the name of the current website. It's going to be called The Art of Co-Living.
Okay, so he's writing The Art of Co-Living, and then I've been reading also his weekly-ish newsletter on co-living, and it is an incredible roundup if you're interested in intentional communities and co-living in any of its forms. It's a really excellent resource. So at the end, we'll put all these things in the comments on the left-hand side so people can check them out. Anything else you want people to know about you?
Well, I've been like fascinated by the whole intentional living movement for like 5 years now. And then like 3 years ago, I used to run some like co-living spaces. So that was kind of my background. Now, like I'm not doing it anymore, but I'd love to live in one.
Yeah.
It's like I'm really curious to also see like today, like because I think like right now we're in a very special situation. Anyways, there's a lot of subjects I want to abord about. Also like the difference, what is the difference for you, between co-living and intentional living or intentional communal living? Is there a difference? And I guess all of these things we can dig into.
Yeah, I think we'll get in there. We'll definitely get in there. I thought we might begin with some premises. I've been enjoying beginning my show with some premises so that you know where I'm operating from as I lead this discussion, as I lead this space. And one premise, and I agree with it, so I would love for Guy to share your updated definition of co-living. I read it and I have it pulled up, but I would love for you to share it.
Sure. Well, for me, co-living is when more than two unbiologically related people or biologically unrelated people live together. Which means that, for example, a big family would not be considered co-living, but anything that's beyond a couple, for me, is co-living. So most people actually, not most, but almost half of them live in co-living spaces if you define it as such, including like roommates and houses like yours. I think that most people understand co-living nowadays as co-living being coming from the for-profit industry. So that it's like housing as a service that you can go in for like X amount of months, and it's offered to you by a third-party provider. But that's the industry definition of co-living. Like, for example, I know that certain spaces, like I think your house is not for-profit. It might be more communal organization. And for me, that is co-living as well.
Yeah. I'm inspired also to share this definition of community that came out of, I used to be an acro yoga teacher, and the co-founders of acro yoga came to Portland when I was living there and did a workshop in which we, in small groups, created definitions of community. This one was not from my group, but I kept it and I have remembered it and marinated on it ever since. Community is a group of 3 or more people and love, exponentially multiplying the potential of human reality. I'll say it one more time. Community is a group of 3 or more people plus love, exponentially multiplying the potential of human reality. So that is a premise that really resonates with me in terms of intentional community and co-living as well. Here's some other premises. Here's some other places that I'm coming from. People living in intentional communities tend to have far more interaction than your typical housemates or families do. So we have a bit more insight into spending a lot of time together that might be useful for this cultural moment, for this quarantine time. I know that many of us in this era are kind of treading water. We're sheltering in place with families of origin that we haven't lived with in a long time. We're in closer proximity to partners than we are used to, with literally no way to blow off steam. We're spending more time with our roommates than we ever intended. A lot of people don't choose their roommates with the idea that they're going to be spending 12 hours a day with them. You know, that's the thing about unintentional communities, right? A lot of apartments are unintentional communities. I'm marinating on this quote from Clarissa Pinkola Estes, and it is, if you can't make something better or different, then make it holy. So we can't affect this virus situation. We can't make it different, but we can focus on making the situation that we have as intentional, as ritualistic, and as holy as possible. And that's something that I love about co-living, that it's deliberate, right? That we do it on purpose. And the amount of humans that we live with, the values that we operate with, the rituals that we engage with, they tend to be chosen. And then my personal belief, as my last premise, my personal belief is that most people choosing to co-live are happier. And there's many reasons for this. Sharing of resources, adequate emotional support, attention, opportunities for collaboration, the pooling of our skills. For instance, I'm no good with fixing things. Thank goodness I have a Deniz in my house. My God. You know, he built all our spice racks. He built out our kitchen to be functional for more than one person at a time. You know, I have none of those skills, but I can lead connection games. in our meetings, So the ability to cross-pollinate and share our skills. The availability of physical affection, hugs, signs of care shown in the household, and a scheduled time for the airing of grievances, which I think is quite important. I am curious about, and Guy, you can speak to the communities that you had founded when you were living there. What are the principles of your communities? What are the values, the shared values?
Nice. First of all, thank you for sharing. And the values that we had two main ones. One was being creative, and that means that we desire to have people around us who wanted to use their time well to serve the greater good. So being creative doesn't mean you need to be an entrepreneur, like run your own company, but it means that you are desiring to put in your effort into something worthy. And the second one is being a contributor or a giver. And I think that, a lot of communities, like when I tend to see people, there are like three types of people. There's like transactional, giving and taking, right? And that's a global generalization. But in co-living communities, I think it's really important that you have people who prioritize the need of others above their own sometimes in order to create a connection. Because you got to go out of your own needs and desires to like be like, hey, Dennis, how are you today? And checking in with other people, right? I mean, Dennis, I just mentioned here. So, yeah, those were the values. Those were the main values. And then, of course, we had like other ones, like duocracy was a big one as well.
I love that idea. Will you explain that idea for everyone?
Yeah. Do you, Dennis, do you know what duocracy is?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So like for everybody else here, at least the way I define is duocracy is a system in which members of that system are able to take decisions if they believe it's aligned with the values of the group and if it's reconvertible. Meaning that if, for example, I want to move the stable here around and turn it around because I believe it's going to be better for the entire group, I can do that. Because worst case scenario, if I'm wrong, we can put the table back. Same thing as if I want to order something like a massage table maybe on Amazon, because worst case, we can just send it back. Even though that's not very ecological. But it's inviting people to take action, to be proactive. And I think that proactivity is crucial in the development of communities, because communities cannot develop by themselves apart from building it.
I love that so much. The idea of duocracy, when I first heard it from Eric Wyckoff Rogers, who was living at the Red Victorian in San Francisco for a long time, shared this idea with me. And the way that I translate it in my New York brain is, you want something done, you just fucking do it. And then as long as it can be, taken back, reversed, if somebody objects. And most of the time when you're doing things to improve your community, not a lot of objection is to be had, right? People are like, oh my God, thank you for the spice rack. This is amazing.
Yeah, definitely. So I think like those were the biggest values. Then of course, like another value was openness or open communication and non-judgment, which is tied to it. Like I guess you can talk about that even more, because especially in your community, which is encouraging even more merger between people, which includes physical merge. One of the key things is so the way I see communities is very simple. It's a bunch of dots or a bunch of people that connect with each other or not, right? And so what it does, it creates trigger points between people. And the whole goal of a community is to turn those trigger points and grow from them instead of holding on to them, because that creates conflict. So one way to go around that is to have open communication between members. And in order to have open communication, members or people need to feel safe. So I think one of the key rules on top of everything is non-judgment. And it's allowing people to be themselves without judgment, which allows them to be themselves, which then allows them to open themselves up.
Yeah, I would admit to having failed at this non-judgment standpoint recently.
I think we all do in certain ways, right? Like it's really hard not to label, and it's really hard not to act.
Especially when it affects other people in the community, right? When the actions have an impact that is deleterious.
Totally.
So, Gia, do you have central values, tenets in your community?
Yeah, I think that basically the community was founded about a little over 30 years ago by people who wanted to live together, to have the most fun together they could. And they were taking courses from a different intentional community and learning a lot about sensuality and basically realized that they could start a party by living together and exploring sort of non-normative relationship forms, and ultimately came away with this idea of friendship. And so how to deliberately build close, gratifying relationship with other people, and friendship being that form, and how you build a friend is through telling them the truth. So that's like the founding idea, really. And here we are, 30 years, still going. And I really like to use the term responsible hedonism, because I don't hear people use that term very often, but it is one that we use and talk about, and I think is really kind of an overarching idea about, when people hear the word hedonism, they think, oh, like you guys are just like naked and having sex parties and nobody's taking care of each other and the house is a mess. And actually responsible hedonism, being a responsible person, and there's so much that comes with that, communicating responsibly, taking care of each other, taking care of your space, and so it's a whole concept. So yeah.
Agreed. Thank you. I think a few things that people don't necessarily know about our community, but I always want them to, is that we actually have a guideline against having sex with each other. It's not something that we do. And that's in order to protect the safety, the emotional safety of the people in our house. So being a sex positive intentional community doesn't mean we're having sex with each other. I think that's important for people to know.
That's very interesting. I just found it very interesting what you're saying. Can you repeat that, especially with the guidelines? So you have guidelines that discourages sex between members?
Yes.
And if yes, how does that fit in then within the bigger picture of being sex positive?
So being a responsible hedonism is being a responsible hedonist, right? Is taking care of the people with which you engage in service of pleasure. And one of the surest ways to bring drama, discord, and fractiousness to a community is for people to have sex with each other and then have problems. And it's so common and so far-reaching that knowing that we had this guideline from the very beginning, which Kenneth shared with me from my first interview, was what convinced me to move in. Because I really didn't want to move into a place that was going to be like the real world sex house. I wanted love and harmony and care to the best of our ability, to the best that we could co-create that. And usually when people have sex, that brings out the drama.
Totally.
We
So-
are, however, clothing optional, and it's great. That makes me very happy. That's actually very important to me. I don't ever want to live in a place where I can't be nude. And I know that that's not true of a lot of intentional communities. So a lot of them would not be the right place for me. So let's talk about some tools. Some things that potentially people in quarantine could pick up from those of us who have lived in intentional communities. The first one that seems the most obvious to me is deliberate and regularly scheduled gatherings. For instance, house meetings, or potlucks, or regular check-ins. We have a house meeting. Well, now it's once a week, right, Denise, during this time?
Yeah.
But it was twice a month, every other Sunday. We had experimented with different ones. We'd experimented with once a month, but then they went forever and everybody was exhausted. And then we moved to twice a month, but people treated one of them as optional, which didn't work very well, because how can we all make decisions if only half of us are showing up thinking that one of these meetings is optional? And now it's more cohesive because we are in crisis time. So we're meeting once a week, including some of us, you know, I've been calling in from Bali, and our housemate Elaine has been calling in from Taiwan. And so we actually have a higher meeting attendance, I think, than we ever have, which is good and important. Did you have house meetings, Gui, at your place?
Yeah, we did once a week. We had a family dinner, and then we combined that with like a meeting. I usually would have like meeting just before or after. And eventually we split those two, because one is actually a social event and the other one is really a more intellectual event. And so we kind of wanted to split the two, because people should be able to come for a dinner or for this and not feel obliged to come for this, but then stay for the dinner, you know. So we split the two apart.
Okay, we've been doing them together. We usually start with a potluck from, what has it been, 7 to 8, Denise?
Yeah. Just about 7, an hour and a half. A potluck and share, so we would share photos, you know, talk about what we've been up to since the last meeting. You know, so basically, yeah, catching up and connecting.
That was my favorite part. We would put our photos up on the projector and just tell people about our past couple weeks in a slideshow, a show and tell. I really enjoyed that. Gia, what are your house meetings like?
We typically have them once a week. We're having them twice a week right now. And they're, yeah, we do, they're separate from the meal situation, but it's nice. Before we were on like we have house meetings, but they would have them more kind of on like a rolling basis. Sometimes they'd be more than once a week. Sometimes we wouldn't have them for long. But I found that people feel I at least feel a lot of security in knowing that, okay, Saturday morning we're doing this, and that it'll be a time that we can all talk together. And also that it's not structured around anything like any kind of panic. It's not like we're having one in a reaction. So it's just nice that people will have this space for, you know, at least an hour together. So.
Something that I think is a really powerful element of our meetings is that the dinner is a potluck, which means that everyone is contributing usually something they've made by their own hands, and putting that together into a meal feels nourishing. You know, oh, you made this, that's delicious, you know, and together we put together, yeah, something that makes sure we're not hangry when we have our meeting. And makes us feel cared for. And that we've been caring for others. We've done an act of care for others before we even begin the meeting.
What I'm also really curious about is like what you have in your meetings, just like because there's a couple of things that you can bring in, right? Like, I guess like one is more like an emotional check-in, and it's more about like, hey, how can we deal with each other better? And then the other one is more a technical check-in, which is how can we improve the house experience, which are two different topics.
Yeah, Deniz, you want to speak to that?
What's that?
Asking Deniz if he wants to speak to that about our meetings.
Yeah, it's kind of, I mean, we have the general house, you know, issues, operational things, you know, we talk about internal and external things as a whole, as overarching. And then each of the house members at the beginning of the meeting can like write a little note about something they need to talk about. So we used to do the emotional check-ins more often. We actually had, and it's changed over the years. I think we used to do just a potluck once a week at one point. We did check-ins once a week at one point. We did circling for a little bit as well. But now, you know, well, since the pandemic happened, we're doing more emotional check-ins. But, you know, prior to that, it would be, you know, global house issues, and then, you know, finite issues, you know, by person, anything anybody wanted to talk about. And then any, you know, major social issues within the house that aren't able to, you know, be resolved between members, for example, we would bring it up to the house to try to get support.
So mostly our meetings are technical, and I think that's what makes them so exhausting. I'm always tired and drained after every single one of our meetings. However, I used to host a check-in, and this is something that I love so much, and it was the emotional piece. We did it weekly. I hosted for 6 months consistently, and we would just share whatever we wanted everyone else to know, because especially in New York, our comings and goings were so 6 in the night and often so quick, and we didn't take that time to check in. So having this carved out deliberate time where we shared, and we did it in different ways. We experimented. At first, we did it with a timer. Depending on how many people showed up, we had either 5 minutes or 3 minutes to share. And then we started figuring out that if we did it as a round robin and we limited it to 1 minute, and I shared for 1 minute, he shared for 1 minute, Deniz shared for 1 minute, Gia shared for 1 minute about our lives, then we would remember all these other things that we wanted to say that were inspired by what you shared about your mom, and what Deniz shared about his work, and what Gia shared about her book. And oh, I forgot that I started reading over my book proposal. I was writing a memoir about the house, and I've been now inspired to start reading over the book proposal that I haven't read in 3 years. And I might be reminded of that and remember that I want to share that because Gia is sharing something about her book. So we would go in a round robin for 1 minute at a time, which meant that it was quicker than the other check-ins, and yet it felt more complete because we would do multiple rounds. And we'd go around and around until everything felt like it was shared. And sometimes we do it in the hot tub. That was awesome. That was really nice. So I think one tool that people could take away from this is deliberate, regularly scheduled experiences together. And just because you're a household of 2 doesn't mean you can't have a house meeting.
Totally.
Okay.
Totally.
My friend Alexa Martinez and her partner Jordan Bowditch, they have relationship board meetings every week. They get together with a whiteboard and they're like, hey, what's great? Oh, I really liked when you licked me there this time, you know, or I really want to do this on our date next week, you know, and they map it out and they look at it like somebody would look at a project or a business. I think that's so interesting. And so you could have a house meeting with, even if you are a household of 2 humans. And you can have a potluck if you're a household of 2 humans. So I think it applies. I think it really applies. The next tool I wanted to talk about is connection games. And this is my favorite thing, one of my favorite things of all time. And there's 3 that I wanted to share, and maybe we'll do one of them briefly. So one is from Mama Gina's School of Womanly Arts, and it's called Trinity. So it consists of 3 parts: a gratitude, a brag or a breakthrough, and then intention or wish. A gratitude, a brag, a wish. And just going around and sharing that, I've done that at Thanksgivings. I felt so connected to everybody, more connected than I felt at any Thanksgiving ever when we did that. There's another kind of similar one, rosebud and thorn, also a triptych. Yes. The rose being what's blooming in you, what's delicious, what's exciting, what feels good. The bud is what's nascent. What do you want to grow? What do you want to water? What do you want to nourish? And the thorn is obviously, ouch, this hurts. And then a more simplified one, I'm a Unitarian Universalist, and use it's a generally very agnostic religion. So it's like, believe what you want to believe, source wisdom from wherever you can find it. There's no reason why we shouldn't come together and worship regardless of what we believe. So for me, as a deeply agnostic person, it's exactly the place. And one of the things I love the most about it is that it borrows traditions and puts a twist on them. And for me, that's what I want to do with ritual. I want to borrow things that feel good, that feel nourishing, and then adapt them to my modern life. So it's borrowed the tradition of the lighting of candles that I remember from going to Catholic church when I was a kid. And it has put this spin on them. You can share, you light your candle, and then you can go up in front of the congregation and share joys and sorrows, or grievances and celebrations. Whatever is really alive in your heart, you can share with the whole congregation. I love it because it invites people in, and you can tell everybody at once. You don't have to tell, everybody individually that your son just passed away, right? You can tell everybody at once, and then people know that if you did share verbally, which you don't have to do, but if you did, then people are invited to talk to you about it, to connect with you over it. So I thought we might do a quick round of grievances and celebrations. Yeah? And if anybody wants to join in the chat, I hope you will share your grievance and celebration in the chat. So I'll go first. I am grieving, feeling a certainty about timelines. Yeah, I'm grieving a more sure timeline about my path. And I am celebrating the fact that I started releasing horizontal again. And this week, I'll be releasing my first exclusive episode for patrons again. And they have been so patient. So I feel this great sense of delight at being able to release something just for them again. And with that, I am complete. Who will go next?
Thank you.
Your turn?
Okay, cool, I guess. I was very, okay, I'm stopping intellectualizing. I'm grieving a bit my past self and my past behaviors. And the second one was excited or gratitude, right?
Celebrating. Yeah, excited about.
Celebration, right? Yeah, and I'm celebrating the fact that being here with you also have a whole beautiful night by myself because it's 4 a.m. here. It was an amazing adventure, and so like right now it's kind of like the sunset of that whole adventure, like coming together.
Thank you. Gia?
I am grieving my sense of uncertainty and uncertainty. And I am celebrating the fact that my book is turning 1 year old next week.
Hey. Congrats. Easy?
I'm grieving at the loss of my industry. And I am celebrating the possibility of taking a sabbatical until it recovers.
Debbie in the comments says, I'm grieving the lack of authentic connection during the pandemic. Me too. I'm celebrating people making safe choices to protect those I love. Thank you for sharing, Debbie. And I'm sure Gui will be back with us sometime soon. So I shared 3 connection games, grievances and celebrations, which we just demonstrated, rose, bud, and thorn, and a trinity, which is the gratitude, brag, and desire. And the last one I wanted to mention of these connection games is that show and tell, kindergarten style, is an incredible connection game. And we've been doing some show and tell on the show. I've been, for instance, learning guitar. And so I've been sharing my little baby guitarist journey, and Tiana showed last time her crown collection. When I did a show and tell, John gave us a tour of his houseboat, which was fascinating for so many people. Can you still hear me even though my video is gone?
Yes.
Yeah, we hear you.
Okay, great. Don't know what to do about that. So but we'll hope it comes back. And people shared poems, things that they were writing, the beginning of a play, so we could even do a show and tell inside our home. Maybe we're working on something that we've not shared with our housemates or our roommates or our partner. So setting up a time, carving out a time for show and tell might be nice. So that's the connection games piece. I wish you could see me.
I'm grieving for your video connection.
Oh dear. I'm
celebrating when I hear your voice.
I'm taking a moment to decide whether I should go away and come back, because that could be dangerous. In the meantime, I will tell you that Maddie shares, I'm grieving the lack of deep connection between my partner and I, but celebrating connections with friends from far away virtually. Thank you, Maddie. All right, the next bit, the next tool is around conflict resolution. So I'm just going to let you marinate on that idea for a moment while I try to rejoin, risky, very risky, but while I try to rejoin this situation.
Well, maybe we can do a little show and tell while we're waiting.
Yeah, who have you got there?
This is my uniduck. It's my spirit animal. And then I also have my little unicorn tape dispenser.
I like that rainbow tape. That's great.
The what now? Oh, the rainbow tape. Yeah.
I've not seen that before. I like that.
And then actually I have this book which Lila gave me. It's also rainbow.
Huh?
So yeah, I have a thing for rainbows and unicorns. Any interesting things near you, Gia?
Yeah, I was going to show you my plants, but maybe we're going to come back to the.
Almost.
Hi, welcome back.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, apologies, my internet just had to reboot it for some reason.
Oh, yeah, Lila also had internet issues.
Yay, same time.
Yeah.
Great.
And yes, Cameron, my spirit animal is a uniduck.
I
One
don't
of our
even
text
know what a
messengers.
uniduck. Is this a uniduck?
Yep.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. Why is my spirit an animal a uniduck? Uh-oh. Can you
Oh.
begin the conflict resolution tools?
Yeah, I will. So when we talked about conflict resolution tools, find each other. The first thing that came to my mind was this concept of finding each other right. And it's something that is like a foundational idea that's part of my community, is that we're all right people living here, and that we view each other that way as a starting point for our interactions. And so we don't need to be fixed or helped, we're right the way we are. And so, but during this time of this crisis, it's been really interesting to feel how it feels like whatever our own proclivities might be are like very magnified, so, things that wouldn't ordinarily be that big of a deal are like become a very big deal. A lot of that's based out of the fear and things that's surrounding us, and that's totally understandable. But sometimes, that can come out in very strange formations. Like a housemate cut his finger the other day, and it was a very big deal. It was like, it felt like a household full drama that was, ordinarily I think would just be a minor incident that needed some care and attention. So I bring this up because I use this viewpoint about finding each other right a lot, where it's like, instead of me hitching myself onto his emotional ride, or thinking his problem is silly, or like dismissing whatever his emotional reaction is, I find him right. Like, he's a right person. What is he actually experiencing right now? And what can I do? And so realizing that what he's experiencing is being magnified by the shelter in place, all of these fears that we have around COVID, and the fears we have for our community and people at large. So using that viewpoint has been a really very useful for me, because it lets me continue communicating with people in a pleasurable way. And so that was my conflict resolution tool.
And is it about conflict, or is it more about perception? Because I have the impression that the principle that you're applying, I'm actually really curious, in a real life example, like for example, one of your roommates cut his finger, right?
Yeah.
So how did you use that? Like maybe he was like screaming around and being like, and you realized that, and you were like, oh, he is just right in his own being. I'm just going to be there to support him. So is it, yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, it really went how I described. Instead of panicking in the way that he was, or fearing for his life and making decisions from that place. Those are real things. Like, yes, you can bleed to death from cutting yourself. But if you are just as panicked as he is, then you can't make clear-headed decisions. You can't really assess what's going on if you're on having the same kind of emotional reaction. So, you mentioned what's like if there's a difference with the conflict or the perception. I think those are very similar things. Like you're in conflict with somebody if you've gotten into agreement with their emotional expression. Basically, that's when conflict happens.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Because there's plenty of things that people say to you that you're just, that's being said, I'm not bothered by that. But then there's other things that you engage with, right?
Yes.
That's the distinction that I make between conflict.
So you're saying by that you're validating their state of being, whatever it may be?
Yeah, finding that right the way it is.
Yeah. Okay.
Lila
So
says,
them as is.
oh, yeah, sorry.
Oh, can I speak to mediation?
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, to me, mediation is trying to remain negative and fully receive. It's almost like being a translator between one person's truth and reality and another person's truth and reality, and then trying to find common ground. And it's also, seeing somebody else's, viewpoint, like, you were saying, Gia, about, a person's way of being. It's, important then, everyone involved feels validated. And when people feel validated and safe, they tend to, be more vulnerable. And if there is some kind of conflict, the mediation will hopefully de-escalate, and then you can get really to the core of the problem, And usually, I would say more than half the time, people's reactions are not at what's actually happening, but something way buried that's just piled on top, So it's addressing that as well. That makes sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Lila, you still with us? I'm trying to think of what other styles of conflict resolution.
I might have something here to contribute. I'm really curious, in your communities, whether you have certain processes on how to deal with conflict. And generally speaking, I can see like this urgent conflict, and there's kind of like non-urgent. So urgent might be somebody is harassing somebody sexually, is maybe like consuming drugs to a point that's actually affecting the house. Like, it's like this kind of like a crisis situation. And the other one is more like, okay, how do we deal with a member that's maybe like, let's engage for the last couple of months and kind of disconnected, which is not something urgent, but which can affect the community in the long run. So I'm really curious, do you have any processes once one of these situations happen? If yes, how do you go about it in the community?
Well, I can speak for ours, and when something urgent like that comes up, like somebody's going to be an immediate danger to themselves or someone else in the community, we have an emergency meeting. And, usually we do it by floor, because it usually affects the floor first, right? In most cases. So, or if it's something external, meaning it's someone outside of the house is being affected by when somebody inside of the house, when it comes to our attention, then, we have a whole house meeting about it. And usually what we do is we try to talk about it as a group first. And then one person will volunteer to be, to talk to the member, because in those situations, especially if someone is distressed or misbehaving or doing something that's dangerous, if 10 people try to talk to them at once, they're just going to go further and further into survival mode.
Yeah.
So it's important to gently come at it, start with a one-on-one, and then from there, we make decisions as a group, sort of, behind the scenes. We bring the issue to the member, and we give them the opportunity to acknowledge what the impact is and then what actions they're going to take. So we empower the member to make adjustments and changes, on their own. We give them we ask for a schedule. By when will you take care of these things, do these things? We have somebody sort of be like accountability buddy. So they're, keeping to what they said they would do. And then, as a group, we'll check in to make sure then the member is doing all the things that they said they would do.
Hello.
Welcome back.
Thank you. So obviously I missed a few things, but I was wondering if anybody responded to Debbie's comment. I love the idea of making people right. How do you navigate the situation when you don't perceive them as right and it's an issue of values that impact your home? This is very dear to my heart at the moment, and I'm trying to figure out how to do better. And I think that one way would be to try to drill down to the core of it, which is usually a desire for safety, a desire for being okay, personally okay.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe if you can't make the behavior right, if you can't validate the behavior as being right, you can validate the core desire. Like, I see that you want to be safe, or I see that you want to, I perceive that you want to take care of people, and I appreciate that about you. And then you can speak to the action itself, separating maybe the intention from the action, because I think most of the time people in our lives aren't doing things out of malice, aren't doing things out of a desire to cause harm. So if we can acknowledge that we see that their desire is not to cause harm, maybe we can come from that place. I'm not saying that I'm amazing at this. I'm failing at it all the time, but perhaps this is a possibility.
I'd love to hear you. I'd love to hear you about this, because to me, I see two things. It's like, one is the person is, a whole person and is in his or her own right. The other one is like, is he or she behaving right within the values that we're agreeing within this community? And a person can be right or like, you can see a person as right, or meaning as having all the rights in his own power, and at the same time you can still for yourself make the judgment or the analysis that his behavior is not in order at all with the values we have in the community. And I guess the challenge then is how to navigate through it without getting emotional, and really, as you said beforehand, just seeing this as like a relationship analysis of the group and just realizing, okay, this is one component doesn't work. Maybe it's time to let go. Maybe it's what transition or whatever it is, right? So, because there are situations where certain members like misbehave to a point where you really feel affected and it's impacting like the atmosphere and the values of the home, etc. And you need to deal with them.
Yeah, thank you for that. We have neared the 1 hour mark, the end of the broadcast. So we'll stay on and hang out afterwards, and we'll share, all the secret things. So if you're still here, that's when we'll dish maybe a little, perhaps. And for those of you watching on the replay, thank you for watching. And we'll make some brief announcements. I have a mailing list if you want to find out about my podcast, this live video show, read my writing, updates from Bali, projects, workshops. Then you can sign up for my mailing list on horizontalwithlila.com. Gia's book on blossoming is available right? On Amazon.
Soon. Give it a couple of months. I need to finish writing it.
And
Oh,
then,
you're talking about Gia, not G. Oh,
Yeah.
sorry.
yeah, G on Blossom, right? And then Gui is sending out a weekly co-living newsletter, right? Where you can sign up on colivingdiaries.com.
That's correct. Yes. And I just share my thoughts on whatever's going on in the world.
I highly recommend it. So colivingdiaries.com. I'm excited to announce that I'm going to be teaching a connection games workshop at a virtual intimacy summit created by Gates, who was a guest on the podcast. And it is May 8th through 10th. It's a 3-day virtual intimacy summit. So if you're feeling like you've been missing that connection, as I know I have, I'm going to participate in this widely. There's all different kinds of events. There's a virtual play party even. There's my platonic connection event. There's events about massage and about communication, about self-care. So for that info, I will put this Eventbrite link in the chat, and I can also put the Facebook invite. So if you attend and you use that link, it helps me directly. Yay! Episode 106 is coming for my patrons this week. Denise, do you have any announcements you would like to make?
Nothing publicly.
Okay, well, one exciting announcement when we close the broadcast. Thank you so much for joining. I'm feeling so much love for Gui and Gia and Denise and all of you who are with us right now. MH and Sherry and Maddie and Debbie and guest 4887. You too.